Hi, my name is Cassie Rouse. I am a freshman here at Bethel. I'm a missional ministries major with a biblical and theological studies minor, and I'm so excited to be here today. I'm going to start out with a quick little poll. So my question is, have you ever heard the phrase, treat your neighbor as you want to be treated, or love your neighbor as yourself? Raise your hand if you have. Yeah, that's everyone in the room. I mean, it's the golden rule, right? You hear it as much in elementary school as you do in Sunday school. Jesus said this in multiple places in the Bible, including Matthew 22:39, where he says that it is the second greatest of all commandments. The thing is, people tend to only focus on one side of this phrase. They focus on, don't do something to someone else that you wouldn't want done to you. If you don't want your friends to be mean to you, you shouldn't be mean to your friends. But what about the flip side of this phrase? Treat people with the same love and grace that you want to be treated with. See people the way that you wish that people would see you. Loving your neighbor as yourself doesn't mean don't be mean. That's the bare minimum of this phrase. It means that when you're sitting there going, I wish someone would go out of their way to say hi to me, to see me, you should be going out of your way to say hi to people, to see them. Because odds are there's a lot of people that feel the exact same way that you're feeling. I may be getting ahead of myself a bit, so let's back up. Today we're going to talk about living for God's glory and our neighbor's good. I'm going to focus on living for our neighbor's good, because when we live for our neighbor's good, we're also living for God's glory and vice versa. The two are connected. You can't separate them from each other. Because as we invest in our neighbors and show them the same love and grace that God shows us, we're bringing God's glory in their lives. The first thing we need to figure out is, who is our neighbor? Is it the people who live in the houses next to us back home? Great. That's two families and I'm not even home half the time now. That's pretty easy. Let's maybe add a couple more people. How about our dorm neighbors, right? So we've got two families and 6 people, right? That's pretty easy. Maybe let's add a couple more. How about our biblical neighbors? Who are those? Biblical neighbors are basically anyone that we interact with. That means our classmates, our professors, people that we work with, maybe the barista at your favorite coffee shop. I'm from Illinois, so personally I'm a big fan of Dunkin'. You guys don't have many of those, which I think is a bit of a crime, but you guys can be good neighbors to the baristas at your local Caribou. Really, our neighbors are just anyone that we know and that we interact with. And some of you may be thinking, I know a lot of people. That is very overwhelming. How am I supposed to live for every single one of their goods? But I promise you it's less overwhelming than it sounds. The question is, how do we live for our neighbor's good? And more specifically, how do we do this without getting completely overwhelmed and burnt out from trying to be there for everyone that we've ever met all of the time? To answer this question, we are going to look back at Acts 16. In Acts, we see Paul and Silas traveling around, helping set up the church, spread the gospel, and clarify some confusions on what exactly it is that Christians believe. In Acts 16, they go on this trip and they make some people really, really mad, which leads to them getting beaten up and thrown into prison, which because they're Roman citizens was actually illegal for them to be thrown in jail without a trial, but they were there anyways. The jailer was told to watch them super, super carefully. So he put them in what's called the inner cell, which was used for extra security, and then he locked their feet up in stocks. So they were stuck, like there was no escaping. And that brings us up to Acts 16:24. And we're going to be reading Acts 16:25 through 34, and I'll stop as we go and just see how are Paul and Silas being good neighbors in the midst of all the chaos that's going on in their lives and everything. How are they still managing to be good neighbors to those around us? We're going to start with Acts 25 and 26, which says, about midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God, and the other prisoners were listening to them. Suddenly, there was such a violent earthquake that the foundations of the prison were shaken. At once, all the prison doors flew open and everyone's chains came loose. So Paul and Silas, they're in prison, they're singing, they're worshiping the Lord, the other prisoners are listening. These two are basically holding their own Vespers service, except for instead of being in Benson Great Hall, you know, with the cushy chairs and the guitars and the lights, they're in this stinky, disgusting jail. All of a sudden, there's this huge earthquake, and the doors fly open, the stocks that their feet were chained on are gone, like they're broken. They could just leave if they wanted to. Now take a second and imagine this. You are wrongfully imprisoned in an awful jail. It seems like everything ahead is pain and torment. All of a sudden, the doors are open, your chains are gone. And what you'll learn in the next verse is the jailer's actually asleep when this happens. What are you gonna do? Because I think I might try and get out. I mean, the doors are open, I'm not even supposed to be there. I feel like there's a good chance I'd try and escape. But that is not what Paul and Silas do. They stay right where they are. Why is that? It's because they see the jailer. At that time, if you were a prison guard and you let your prisoners escape, you would be killed because it was your life or theirs. They knew that, they saw that, they stayed right there. In the midst of their life being crazy, it would have been so easy for them to want to be selfish in that moment, to be like, I'm out of here, I'm not even supposed to be here. But instead, they stopped and they saw the guard, they saw his situation. And this is such an important way for us to live for our neighbor's good. It is so easy for us to get caught up in everything that's going on in our lives and forget to stop and see people. It's easy to have one of those, hey, how are you? Good, and you? Good, good, bye, kind of a conversation, as you're walking past them in the DC, and forget to actually slow down enough to actually talk to someone and to see past the facade that they have on, to see what's actually going on in their lives. Seeing people can have such an impact, and it doesn't mean that you need to fix everything. It doesn't mean that you need to have a solution. It just means to say something like, hey, I know a lot's been going on and it must be really stressful, but I'm here if you need anything. Or, hey, I know you had a really bad day today, so I bought you your favorite coffee. I hope your day gets better. It doesn't have to be this huge commitment. You just need to pay attention to what's going on in the lives of those around you, and then say something or do something nice in response. It's simple, but it makes such a difference when someone sees what you're going through and tries to help out a little bit, or even just says, hey, this must be hard. I see that this is hard and you're trying your best. It makes a huge difference. The next verses we're gonna read are 27 and 28, which say, the jailer woke up, and when he saw the prison doors open, he drew his sword and was about to kill himself because he thought the prisoners had escaped. But Paul shouted, don't harm yourself, we're all here. As I said earlier, if a prisoner were to escape, it was the jailer's life for the prisoners. So he was probably thinking that if he killed himself, it would look like the prisoners did it instead of him letting the prisoners escape. So he runs in, sees that all the doors are open, and assumes that all the prisoners are gone because why would they stay? He decides on his only way out, and in the midst of what is most likely one of the worst moments of this man's life, Paul decides to be there. He decides to call out. He says, hey, don't worry, don't hurt yourself, we're all here. He is there for him in this moment. He steps into this messy moment, into this scary moment. And this is such a good way that we can live for our neighbor's good. In February of 2020, my older brother got double pneumonia and he was admitted into the ICU for about 10 days. He was on the ventilator for most of it, which means he wasn't getting enough oxygen into his lungs, and so they had to keep him asleep, and they had this machine that was basically like putting oxygen into his lungs for him. And it was the most stressful and terrifying week of my life. And my family spent a lot of time in the waiting room that week, and a lot of family friends sent us messages that they were praying or gift cards, and they were doing an amazing job of seeing our family and what they were going through, what we were going through. And every one of those messages meant the world. On the Saturday that we were there, my friend Aaron and his mom came by and they brought snacks and board games. And they spent most of their Saturday sitting in a hospital waiting room with us, playing games, talking, laughing, just being there. They couldn't help the situation. There was no way for them to help my older brother feel better. There was no solution, but them just being there made that day so much better. Sometimes our neighbors are going through things that we can't solve, that we can't really help, that we can't fix. But the power of just sitting with someone so they're not sitting alone in their pain or in their sorrow, the power of just saying, hey, I'm right here. You are not by yourself, I'm right here with you. It's so much greater than you would think. Being there is a really good way to live for your neighbor's good, because all you have to do is sit there, and it lets them know that they're not alone. It lets them know that they have people who are willing to be there for them in the midst of chaos, in the midst of their pain, in the midst of not just the little hardships, not just the good things, but in the really, really bad things. They have people who actually care enough, who actually see them enough to step into that. And that's hard to find in the world, people who are willing to be there no matter what is going on. Part of being a good neighbor and living for God's glory is stepping into these moments for the people around us. We're going to finish up this story by reading 29 through 34, which says, the jailer called for lights, rushed in and fell trembling before Paul and Silas. He then brought them out and asked, sirs, what must I do to be saved? They replied, believe in the Lord Jesus and you will be saved, you and your household. They then spoke the word of the Lord to him and to all others in his house. At that hour of the night, the jailer took them and washed their wounds. Then immediately he and all his household were baptized. The jailer brought them into his house and set a meal before him. He was filled with joy because he had come to believe in God, he and his whole household. So the jailer knows that there has to be something different about Paul and Silas, because why else would they stay? Why else would they care enough to step into that moment of his life? The jailer knows that there has to be something true and transformative about the God that they serve and the way that he calls us to love people. So he comes in and he asks, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" Paul and Silas then take the time to teach him about the gospel, him and his household. They baptize him and his household. They eat dinner with him. This is the same man that was just locking them in prison. They took the time to actually invest in this man's future. They took time to teach him about Jesus. They ate with him. They laughed with him. They met his family. They really invested in this man's future. And investing in people's future is such a good way that we can live for our neighbor's good. But I feel like when I say invest in people's future, that sounds kind of intimidating. And people are kind of like, oh, I don't know if I can do that. Because people feel like they need to be perfect to invest in someone's future, or they need to have it all together, or they need to have this great faith or this great theological background to answer any question someone may have. That is not true at all. I'm going to tell you a story that shows just how simple investing in people's future can be. When I was in high school, I counseled for middle schoolers a lot. And one year at middle school summer camp, I was counseling a group of girls that I had already counseled before. So I knew like 90% of them. The only ones I didn't know was if one of those girls like had invited their friends, right? And so they were joking. They were like, "Cassie, I have no idea who you are. I don't think I've ever actually met you before." And so I was like, "Yeah, actually, I don't know who you are. Hi, I'm Kathy Roos," as opposed to Cassie Rouse. I know, not funny at all, not funny. But these girls thought that it was hilarious. They cracked up. They were like, "Oh my God, I need a fake name like that." So they all came up with fake names that started with the same letter as their actual name. And all week, every time I saw them, they go, "Hi, Kathy," and I'd go, "Hi, Nora," or whatever their fake name was, all week. This joke was silly, it was fun, and most of them dropped it like a week after camp. There was one girl, however, who I hadn't met before camp started, that kept it up. Every single time I walk into youth group, she'd go, "Hi, Kathy," and I'd go, "Hi, Allison," which was her fake name. She'd go, "Hi, Kathy." I'd go, "Hi, Allison, how was your week?" We'd just go back and forth and back and forth. And eventually she would tell me about her week and what was going on in her life. And that was actually me investing in her future, keeping up that joke. Because every single week, the first thing that I did when I walked into that building was I went up to her and I talked to her. Every single week I had an excuse to ask her about her week, to ask her what was going on in her life. This joke started in 2019, and yet when I was home for break, I was talking to some of my friends, and from across the church I hear, "Hi, Kathy!" And I go, "Hi, Allison, I missed you." It's investing in her future because it means something to her, because it shows her that I see her, that I love her, that I care about her. It's so simple. All I did was keep up a joke, and that actually made it where I could invest in her future. You don't have to be intimidated by the idea of investing in someone's future, because it doesn't have to be this big scary thing. As long as it is genuine, it's consistent, and it shows that you care about them, it's actually investing in their future. I do believe that consistency is pretty important when it comes to any of these things. So investing in someone's future, seeing people, being there for them, it's important to be consistent because, first of all, when you're consistently doing that for a person, they'll eventually realize that you are coming from a different kind of love and grace that they see in the world. They may start trying to love their neighbors the way that you're loving them, and they may even start to wonder, how are you loving people so well? How are you treating your neighbors so well? And then you can point them to God. The other reason why it's really important is because it kind of really hurts when someone who is really consistently seeing you or being there or investing in you suddenly stops. I mean, imagine if next time I walk into church, I hear, "Hi, Kathy," and I go, "Hi, Audrey," and I walk away. Audrey's her real name. Well, technically, I didn't do anything mean. You can see why her feelings would be hurt, right? You can see why she would start to question our friendship or wonder if she did something wrong or wonder if me going away to college meant that I didn't care about her anymore, I didn't remember her. Because our entire friendship was built on this one joke. And if I suddenly stop with no warning, it hurts, right? And that's why these three things that Paul does, they're not steps. I'm not asking you to do all three of these things for every single person that you know. I'm not even asking you to do one of these things for every single person that you know. I'm asking you to pick a few people for each thing. Pick 2 or 3 people to try and really, really invest in their future. Pick 3 or 4 to try and really be there for. And the number of people that we're seeing kind of varies because we should be trying to see everyone, but if we're trying to like really, really see them the way I was describing earlier, try 4 or 5. Start small, and as you build up good ways to do these things, you can increase the number if you find that you have time in your life to do that. And if you find that you don't, that's okay. Keep the numbers the same. As long as we are trying to live for our neighbor's good, that's what matters. I would take time over the next couple days to really stop and ask God who He wants you to see, to be there for, to invest in. Ask Him to point people out. And well, it would be really easy to go, oh yeah, I'm gonna pick my best friend to be there for. I would actually encourage you not to do that, because your friends you should already be seeing, you should already be being there for, you should already be investing in. Pick someone you don't know super well, because then you can begin to start to form this amazing friendship built on God's love. You can show them that even though I don't know you very well, I actually care about you a lot. I see you, you matter to me, even though we're not this close, even though there's no reason why you should, other than God's love. We started out today by talking about the golden rule, right? And how in Matthew, Jesus said it was the second greatest of all commandments. That begs the question, what is the greatest commandment, right? So Matthew 22, 35 through 40 says, one of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question, Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these two commandments. At that time, the law and the prophets is what the Old Testament was often referred to as. So Jesus is essentially saying the entire Old Testament hangs on loving your God and loving your neighbor, on living for God's glory and your neighbor's good. The whole Old Testament rests on these two things. Do you understand why it's so important that we're loving our neighbors the way that God's calling us to? That is the entirety of the Old Testament, is that we're loving God and loving our neighbors. And the two things are the same. When we're loving our neighbors, we're loving God. And when we're loving God, we're loving our neighbors. And I know, believe me, I know, right now is so stressful and it's so overwhelming. There's probably about 30 reasons why you don't want to start trying to do a new thing right now. But I promise you that this is something that's worth it, because you're always going to be stressed. You're always going to have things going on. You're always going to be busy. But this is something that's worth fitting into your schedule. You're not going to regret taking time to stop and see someone or sit with them or invest into their lives, because that can bring so much joy and light and peace. You can bring God's glory just by sitting with someone in a hospital waiting room, or bringing someone a coffee, or keeping up an inside joke. What you do and say makes a difference in people's lives. Every single day, the choices that you make, the things that you choose to do, the things that you choose to say, can and will make a difference in people's lives. So use that to live for God's glory and your neighbor's good. Use that to treat your neighbors as you want to be treated, to make a difference in this world, to treat people as God's children. As we end today, try to think about who God is calling you to really see, who God's calling you to really be there for, who God's calling you to really invest in, and don't be afraid to step into those moments, because they're actually bringing God's glory. Thank you.